The 28th bell stroke is still thinning over Hanyang when the patrolman beside you sees a figure move where the street ought to be empty. Joseon has not locked its capital at the instant of sunset. It has waited until the official evening signal, around 10 o'clock in this later period, which is rather late for a title and exactly on time for a bureaucracy. If these long histories honestly help you settle, you may like or subscribe and tell me where you are listening and the local time there. Let the room grow dim, find a comfortable position, and come inside the walls of the Joseon capital on a cold night. You are an adult patrolman with a lantern, a wooden clapper, and one ordinary task. Complete the assigned round without mistaking necessary movement for forbidden movement. Behind you, gate timbers are shifting into place. Ahead, the lone traveller does not stop at once. The last vibration of the bell leaves the roof tiles, and your companion raises the lantern. The city has changed its rules for the night, but it has not become silent, sealed, or simple. The patrolman feels the bell's final vibration through the lantern handle, a public sound ending in one private decision. The traveller reaches into his coat as though the right piece of paper can make the entire darkness explain itself. You hear the gate before you see it. Wood presses against wood, iron fittings answer with a dull complaint, and the men at the entrance complete a procedure already begun before the final stroke. That closing is one part of the night, not the whole of it. The city gates cut traffic between the walled capital and the roads beyond. Patrols restrict movement through streets inside. Householders, hearing the same signal, draw shut their own gates and doors. 3 connected rhythms follow one public sound, but no single hand closes them all. Your own hand is occupied with the lantern while the traveller produces a folded document. He calls it a muljamar, a permit not to be stopped by the night prohibition. The term is new only to the listener. To the patrolman, it means more work, because a permit is useful precisely when the rule has exceptions, and inconvenient precisely when several offices have decided to issue one. You do not yet know whether this paper is current, copied, altered, or merely confident. The traveller says he serves an office and must carry a message before the next watch. He names the office first, as men often do when they hope the institution will arrive several steps ahead of them. The gate crew's movement continues behind him, while the household bolts ahead answer later and at smaller scale. You keep the lantern steady and ask him to hold the permit where both patrolmen can see. You do not seize him, not yet. The ordinary rule is clear enough to sound impressive when spoken indoors. After the evening signal, unauthorized movement is restricted. Patrols take violators to a watch post, and the hour of the offence can affect what follows. The street does not offer the comfort of an indoor sentence. Lantern oil trembles. The paper has a heading, a seal, and creases that look older than the traveller's urgency. Later Joseon records show why your hesitation is not weakness. Muljamar permits were meant to keep necessary night business moving, yet scholars find periods when they were overissued, when old and new forms circulated together, and when separate offices made their own. A rule that depends on documents becomes only as neat as the drawer in which the documents are kept, and this drawer appears to have been kicked down a stair. You ask the traveller who issued his permit and when. He gives an answer that may be correct, then adds the name of a superior who is not present. Your companion shifts the clapper to his other hand. The city wall remains where it was. The gate behind you is closed. He checks the paper's worn edge against the fresh urgency in the traveller's voice, keeping both observations separate. Yet, the real boundary now lies in a narrow strip of paper between your fingers, where lawful duty and convenient authority have been written in nearly the same ink. You signal the traveller to stand beside the wall rather than in the middle of the lane. It is a small movement, but it changes the encounter from a chase into an inspection. The man obeys. That matters. Patrol systems in later Joseon divided the capital into districts among organizations such as the police bureau, patrol offices, and military commands. Their written reach could look dense on a plan. yet the people enforcing it were spread across real lanes, corners, bridges, and watch posts. They listened for one another and for the time signals that marked the night watches. The wooden clapper in your companion's hand is not decoration. Its sharp call announces that a patrol is present and lets another group answer from farther down the route. He strikes it. The sound runs between walls, brisk and plain. After a pause, another clapper replies. You know where at least one neighbouring patrol should be. The traveller knows it too. His shoulders lose a little of their forward tilt. You turn the permit toward the lantern, a later surviving patrol plaque, made of wood and marked for central patrol duty, reminds us that authority could be worn and shown as well as spoken, though no source proves every man carried the same object. Your own authority tonight is less elegant. The answered clapper confirms another adult is close enough to witness what follows, which lowers the risk of a private quarrel. It is a cold hand, a route, a witness, and the obligation to write down what you decide. You begin the next part of the round with the traveller walking between the two patrolmen. This is not passage granted, and it is not detention decided. It is controlled movement toward a place where the paper can be checked. The distinction is useful because the records do not support a picture of every violation ending in the same punishment. Normative schedules existed. Watch posts held people until morning. Some accounts set different blows according to the watch in which a person was caught. But enforcement changed with century, district, office, status, resistance, and the judgment of men who had to bring a case forward. The traveller says delay will ruin the errand. You answer that an unchecked permit may ruin your own morning. Neither statement is heroic. Both are true enough to keep everyone walking. Roof lines pass on your right. To your left, a household gate closes after the public bell has already finished, reminding you that the city's nightly change travels at human speed. A child inside asks a question too muffled to understand. A bolt settles. The capital has not vanished into darkness. Fires still need watching, officials still keep duty, and people still have reasons to move. The curfew does not erase those reasons. The escort pace gives everyone time to cool, and it keeps the traveller's destination inside a visible chain of custody. It turns them into claims that someone must test. You count your steps to the next corner, because the route is easier to keep when the cold is trying to shorten it. The traveller tries once more to walk half a pace ahead. Your companion touches his sleeve and restores the proper arrangement. The correction is gentle, almost domestic, as though three men are carrying a long table through a narrow room, and only one of them has misunderstood the furniture. Beyond the corner, the lane widens near an official compound. A lamp remains lit at its gate. Night duty itself is one reason the state needed a way to authorize movement. Messages, watches, security work, and other necessary tasks could not all stop because the public signal had sounded. The permit system answered that problem. It also created a second one. When officers issued too many passes, used old forms beside new ones, or relied on their own authority, a patrolman faced not simply a traveller, but a small argument between institutions. You ask whether the messenger came directly from the compound whose name appears on the paper. He says yes. The guard at the compound gate says he cannot confirm it without waking a clerk. The traveller objects that waking the clerk will waste time. You look at the old folds of the permit. The compound lamp makes the old creases easier to see, but age alone still cannot decide validity. A document that saves time in theory has now assembled 4 adults to discuss who ought to be sleeping. You ask the compound guard for the name of the clerk who keeps the current forms. He gives it reluctantly, then disappears through the inner gate. The traveller lowers his voice and says his superior will hear of this. The sentence is not quite a threat, and not quite information. Scholarship on 17th and 18th century enforcement finds many recorded violators among lower functionaries attached to powerful offices. Their confidence could come from the institution behind them, and confrontations with patrol officials sometimes became abusive or violent. That history does not mean every messenger bullied every patrol, nor does it make tonight's traveler guilty. It explains why your companion watches his hands and why you keep the exchange public. You strike your clapper once. The nearby patrol answers. A second witness is available if needed. The traveler hears the reply and changes his tone. He says the message concerns a roster that must reach another office before its night shift changes. This is plausible. It is also conveniently difficult to verify from the street. You ask to see the outside notation again. The seal impression is worn but not absent. The paper names an office that exists. The date is the problem. Old and new permits circulating together are not a modern guess. They are part of the later administrative confusion described in the research. By asking the same practical questions twice, the patrolman tests consistency without pretending that confidence proves official duty. You wait for the clerk who can tell one from the other. You wait without pretending the city is still. A watch signal sounds farther off, smaller than the central bell and easier to lose among walls. The state used repeated signals and relay points because sound has limits. Patrols changed or coordinated by the watches of the night, and a missed call could put a group out of sequence. Your companion listens, then answers with the clapper. The traveler listens too, perhaps for the first time as someone subject to the system rather than carried by an office through it. At the compound gate, no one appears. You warm one hand beneath the other sleeve. The lantern throws the permit's characters into relief and leaves everything beyond it uncertain. This is the practical shape of government at night. A standard rule, a measured signal, a route assigned on paper, and a clerk who has apparently located the deepest available blanket. You do not knock again immediately. The guard inside knows why you are there. Instead, you ask the traveler to repeat the destination and the name of the receiving official. His second answer matches the first. Consistency does not prove authority, but it changes the balance. You begin forming a defensible choice. The recorded answer from the nearby patrol lets him wait for the clerk without leaving his own route unsupported. Either the clerk confirms the permit, or the traveler goes with you to the watch post where the matter can be recorded and held until another official takes responsibility. The inner gate opens at last. A clerk steps out carrying a second lamp and the expression of a man who has been awakened by a document he did not personally misplace. You present the permit without summarizing the traveler's claims. Let the paper speak first. The clerk studies the heading, turns it over, and asks where it was issued. He recognizes the office but not the current form. Then he notices a notation near the fold. This permit belongs to an older issue that has not been formally collected from every subordinate. It may still be honored for a limited kind of duty, but the clerk will not say so until he checks the roster. The traveler begins to explain. You lift a hand and stop him. The clerk returns inside. No one has won. That is a useful development. The curfew's purpose was not to manufacture victories between tired men. It helped the state manage public order, capital security, gate operations, patrol shifts, and the risks of movement after the city's main entries had closed. A permit should allow work the state itself requires, while preventing every confident person from declaring his journey necessary. Your task is to keep that distinction intact long enough for evidence to arrive. The gate lamp behind the clerk's door moves across paper screens. The clerk's second lamp enlarges the small circle of evidence, bringing office knowledge into the patrolman's street decision. The traveler rubs his fingers together and waits. You use the pause to listen down the street. A dog shifts behind a household gate. Somewhere a wooden bucket meets stone, followed by an annoyed whisper. The night is quieter than daytime, but not empty, and certainly not sealed with the perfection suggested by a simple diagram. Hanyang's wall marked the capital, and its gates controlled the main crossings. Yet enforcement inside the wall was the stronger center of the curfew system. Scholarship notes that patrol beyond the walls was more discretionary. Agricultural movement and the wider terrain made uniform enforcement difficult. That difference matters because a traveller caught here, inside a district watched by several organisations, faces a different practical environment from someone moving on an outer road. The rule has geography. It also has time. Earlier and later watches could carry different expectations and penalties in normative accounts. You are near the beginning of the shut hours, when the signal is fresh and an unauthorised figure is hard to explain as mere confusion. The traveller knows this. He no longer argues that the bell was unclear. Instead, he rests everything on the permit. The paper has become his bridge through the night. The cart sound beyond the wall remains only a sound. The patrolman refuses to turn uncertainty into a claim. You keep it in your own hand until the clerk returns, because bridges built by officers still require someone to check the boards. The clerk returns with a narrow register. He does not bring a grand decree, only a page of names and duties. The traveller's name is present, the destination is present, the date beside the duty is current, though the permit form itself is old. The clerk explains that the office has not yet replaced every document held by its subordinate messengers. This is exactly the sort of administrative untidiness that made patrol work difficult, and exactly why an old form cannot be dismissed merely because it looks old in lantern light. You ask the clerk to mark the register and add a note that the permit was checked on this route. He agrees. The traveller asks whether he may now go. You say he may go under escort to the boundary of your patrol district, where the next group can receive the verified information. His face shows relief mixed with offence that relief was ever necessary. Your companion returns the permit. The decision is neither indulgence nor punishment. It gives lawful work passage while preserving a trace of who checked it, in a system troubled by too many forms and too much borrowed authority. A written note is a modest repair. The clerk bends over the page. Ink touches paper. The clerk's ink gives the old permit a current context, which is more useful than either automatic trust or automatic rejection. The whole capital does not become orderly, but one uncertain movement becomes accountable. You set out again with the traveller now beside rather than between the patrolmen. The change in position is small, but it signals that he is no longer being held while his claim is tested. He still may not wander. The permit authorises a task, not the private ownership of every dark lane. At the next corner, your companion sounds the clapper in a short pattern. A patrol answers from the adjoining district. You wait until their lantern appears. Then you explain the check, name the issuing office, and show the clerk's fresh notation. The receiving patrolman reads it twice. He looks at the old form, then at you, and says the office should replace these before everyone involved grows old enough to qualify as an antique. The traveller almost smiles. The joke is not aimed at his rank or at the men enforcing the curfew. It belongs to the paper that has outlived administrative patience. The new patrol takes responsibility for the next section. You return to your route. The 28th stroke is long gone now, but its consequence continues through gates, watch posts, household doors, and this handoff. A central signal can change the legal condition of a city in a moment. The receiving patrol repeats the issuing office and route aloud, ensuring responsibility moves with the traveller rather than falling between districts. Making that change work requires slower acts. Listening, stopping, checking, recording, and passing responsibility from one tired adult to another. You have your answer to the title now, though the round continues. Joseon closed Hanyang for the night because a capital full of palaces, offices, stores, residences, and guarded entrances needed an organized change of condition after daytime movement. The evening signal coordinated gate management, restricted unauthorized traffic, supported patrol work, and helped protect public order in the seat of government. It was not literally the instant of sunset, and it was not one perfectly uniform command applied identically for 5 centuries. Around 10 o'clock in the later institutional accounts, the signal announced that the city had entered its night regime. What followed depended on where a person stood, which century it was, what office claimed them, what permit they carried, and how the patrol judged the circumstances. You make that answer physical by turning down a narrower lane. A household bolt has stuck halfway. 2 adults inside push and pull until it settles, their private gate closing after the city gate is already shut. Farther on, a servant empties ash into a covered vessel before withdrawing. A patrolman cannot confuse these brief movements at a doorway with a traveller crossing districts. Rules become workable through distinctions. The patrolman sees the title's answer in his own route. The capital is changed by rule, then managed through distinctions. You listen, see no one advancing along the lane, and move on without converting every sound into an offence. Your route bends toward a watchpost, the kind of place where a detained person could be held until daylight and passed into a more formal process. Tonight its door is open just wide enough for a lamp. A man inside copies names from one sheet to another. He looks up when you arrive and asks whether the traveller caused trouble. You say the permit was old but supported by a current roster. He writes a brief note beside the patrol district and nods. The record matters because tomorrow's officials may otherwise see only an old pass and an unexplained journey. Normative sources describe punishments that varied with the watch of the night, sometimes 10, 20, or 30 blows. Those schedules show seriousness, but they cannot be treated as a machine that produced the same result every time. The scholarly record is full of conflict, privilege, irregular permission, and uneven enforcement. You do not turn this into a catalogue of pain. The human point is simpler. Bringing someone to the watchpost was a consequential act, so a patrolman needed reasons he could defend. The clerk at the post sands the fresh ink. Your companion takes a drink of water. The watchpost brazier warms the detained and the officials alike, while the written process separates custody from final judgment. Then the 2 of you step back outside, where the clapper call of another group confirms that the next part of the circuit is still moving. You cross a street that is broad by the standards of the lanes behind it. In daylight it would carry carts, officials, sellers, porters, and people whose errands become one another's obstacles. Now the broad surface makes each lantern more visible. That visibility is part of the night's order. A moving light can be challenged from farther away, while a person without one may be heard before he is seen. Your companion taps the clapper. The answer comes from near a bridge, then another from behind the government quarter. The sound does not create an unbroken net. It creates points of assurance. This group is here. That route is occupied. The watch has not dissolved into separate men guessing in the cold. Sources on late Joseon patrol policy describe districts divided among several institutions. They also show that elaborate arrangements did not eliminate violations. No map can force a powerful attendant to respect a patrolman, and no statute can keep an office from treating its own paper generously. You understand the system's ambition without mistaking ambition for perfection. At the far side of the street, a figure opens a compound gate, places a covered container outside, and withdraws. You wait. No one arrives to collect it. The gate closes. The movement belongs to the doorway, not the road. Each returned clapper call marks a piece of the route as occupied, not an entire city as perfectly watched. You continue. The cold becomes more noticeable after the permit dispute, as though your body postponed its complaint until the paperwork was settled. You flex the fingers that held the lantern. The patrol route takes you toward a low rise where the wall can be sensed beyond roofs, even when it cannot be seen directly. Hanyang-dosung, the capital wall, did more than present stone. Its gates concentrated entry and exit. Its line distinguished the capital's interior from surrounding districts, and its nightly closure made the legal geography of movement easier to supervise. Yet the scholarly evidence warns against extending the capital's practice evenly into the outer terrain. Beyond the wall were fields, roads, settlements, and agricultural routines. Patrol there could be more discretionary, and strict curfew enforcement could obstruct the movement required by cultivation. Inside, your assigned lane has clear neighbors and a watch post within reach. Outside, the The same neatness was harder to maintain. You hear a cart wheel beyond the wall, faint and irregular. It might be on an outer road. It is not your district, and you cannot see it. The sound reminds you that a city boundary controls attention as well as bodies. The faint outer cart reminds him that the wall concentrates authority without making the countryside follow the same pattern. You turn toward the next clapper call, rather than inventing an offense in a place you do not patrol. A second moving figure appears near a shrine wall, this one carrying no visible document. You raise the lantern and call for him to stop. He does so immediately and identifies himself as a guard returning from a short exchange between nearby posts. His explanation can be checked without waking another clerk because your companion recognizes the signal cord at his belt and knows the post he names. A surviving wooden patrol plaque in the National Museum bears words for Central Patrol and the Military Ministry with a cord for wearing. Its precise users and date remain uncertain, so you do not imagine every guard equipped exactly alike. The object still shows a useful principle. Night authority could be embodied in a token that another official knew how to read. You ask the guard for the countersign used on this watch. He gives it. Your companion answers. The exchange is brief. The man continues to his post, and you continue to yours. Not every stop must become a drama, and not every permission requires folded paper. The rule depends on recognized duties, places, words, and objects, all set inside a chain of responsibility. The efficient encounter lasts less than a minute. The recognized countersign allows a brief passage because duty, place, and identity agree at the same moment. It is the sort of success that leaves almost no record, which is why archives often preserve the failures more vividly than the ordinary nights that worked. You turn into a market lane where shutters have been drawn but smells remain. Grain dust, lamp smoke, cold wood, and the last trace of cooked broth occupy the space after sellers have gone. The signal did not make commerce cease at a magical edge. People finished small tasks, secured stock, banked fires, and closed private gates in response to a public timetable. That is why the capital's nightly transformation was a rhythm rather than a single physical lock. The major gates had their own guards and mechanisms. Patrols began or continued their rounds. Households completed their closures at different moments. Palace staff followed another sequence around the king's night and dawn duties. The bell synchronized these actions without making them simultaneous to the heartbeat. Near a shutter, you find a loose board lifting in the wind. It knocks twice, pauses, then knocks again. Your companion raises the clapper before realizing the street has acquired a very small and badly trained patrolman. You wedge the board with a stone so the noise will not summon 3 districts. The humour belongs to the inconvenience, not to the people living here. When you stand, the lane is quiet again. The loose shutter stops knocking after the stone is placed, leaving the patrol to attend to human movement again. You mark the location for the market keeper and move toward the bridge. At the bridge, water makes a low sound under the darkness. A patrol from another command approaches at the appointed meeting point. Their leader reports one detained man who could give neither a lawful duty nor a recognized permit, and who tried to leave when challenged. He is already at the watch post, uninjured, with the time and place recorded. You report the old permit and the escorted handoff. The 2 outcomes sit beside each other without contradiction. One traveler supplied a claim that could be verified. The other did not and resisted the stop. Even then, the later process is not yours to invent. Officials at dawn will decide what follows under the rules and circumstances. The patrol leaders compare routes. One lane has not been covered because a man was sent to replace a broken lamp. You and your companion agree to include it on the return. The immense language of state order contracts into 4 people deciding who will walk an extra street. Someone observes that the broken lamp has achieved a promotion, since it now commands 2 patrols. The line is quiet, and then everyone separates. You cross the bridge with a revised route. The revised route is repeated by both leaders, so the uncovered lane becomes an assigned task, rather than an assumption. This is how a system adapts without becoming shapeless. The duty remains, the path changes, and the change is communicated. The uncovered lane runs beside a government storehouse. Its walls are plain, its gate barred, and its watchman awake enough to answer. You ask about the broken lamp. He points to a bracket where a wind-shifted fitting has spilled oil and extinguished the flame. No one was hurt, and the remaining light covers the entrance poorly. The watchman has sent for another lamp, but cannot leave the storehouse unattended. You position your own lantern while your companion inspects the ground. Public order at night includes events much less dramatic than chasing offenders. A darkened official entrance can hide a loose fitting, invite a stumble, or leave guards unable to recognize a returning worker. The central signal has established the night's restrictions, but each post still needs practical attention. A young runner arrives carrying a replacement lamp and a written note from the nearby office. You check the note, the watchman recognizes him, and the exchange is completed. The runner carries a direct note rather than a mulgium chup, and both nearby posts confirm him. The scene does not claim that every office or period used the same practice. You do not announce a universal exemption. You record the runner's name because tonight has already demonstrated the value of leaving tomorrow a legible trail. The new flame catches. The replacement lamp makes the storehouse entrance legible again, and the runner's name settles into the night's record. You return the lantern to your side and continue. A watch signal reaches you in stages. First a distant metallic note, then another answer nearer the palace quarter, then a drum from a relay point whose sound is smaller than the central bell. The National History account describes why such relays existed. Signals could be lost between the standard water clock, palace stations, the bell tower, and neighborhoods beyond direct hearing. Intermediate instruments and dedicated personnel reduced error. 18 relay posts are described for parts of the system, especially around busy areas and palace surroundings. You do not need to picture 18 perfect circles of sound. You only need to hear this answer arrive late enough that your companion tilts his head. He counts, waits, and compares it with the expected watch. Then he strikes the clapper to mark your patrol's position. A second reply confirms the sequence. The city-wide apparatus depends on measured water and official rules, but also on ears that can distinguish one sound from another while wind moves between roofs. Your companion says the state has arranged a great many instruments to ensure that he, personally, cannot pretend he missed his shift. You tell him the arrangement appears successful. The repeated relay answer reaches the patrol after a pause, enough to align the route with the correct watch. The route continues, and the joke fades with the drum. You pass a private gate that remains slightly open. Light falls through the gap, and two adults are moving a chest away from the threshold. They see the patrol and explain before you ask. A hinge pin has shifted, preventing the gate from closing fully. The householder has sent a family member to fetch the carpenter who lives 3 doors away. This is movement after the signal, but it is local, visible, and tied to securing the very gate the nightly rhythm expects them to close. You do not need a 5th-century doctrine for a 3-door errand. You ask that the runner carry the household lamp and return directly. Your companion remains while you walk to the carpenter's gate, strike the wood, and confirm that he has been called. The carpenter emerges with a tool roll and the expression of a man whose professional reputation has reached him at an unfortunate hour. He resets the pin. The household gate settles into place. No record cited here gives this exact repair. It is plausible low-stakes staging built around the documented practice of households closing gates with the public signal. You leave without turning the moment into a legal precedent. The repaired hinge leaves the household gate fully closed, resolving the local movement that first drew attention. The action simply shows how ordinary life meets a governing rhythm, not by freezing, but by completing what the rhythm requires. You leave the repaired household gate and rejoin the assigned line of the patrol. The next street is darker, but the tasks have become more familiar. Stop the moving figure, ask for a reason, check the place, the duty, the token, the witness, or the permit. Decide whether movement can continue. must be escorted, or should end at the watch post. The system appears severe when summarized as a curfew, and more complicated when carried one encounter at a time. Its complexity does not cancel its force. A person without permission could be detained, and the state repeatedly tried to strengthen enforcement. Yet the same government required night work and issued documents to allow it. The conflict was built into the purpose. Capital security demanded restriction. Administration demanded selected movement. You walk between those demands with no view of the entire city. At an intersection, a man in an official servant's coat approaches quickly. He slows only after your companion blocks the easier path. He has no paper in hand. He says his office is known, and his superior's name should be sufficient. You ask for the duty he is performing. He repeats the superior's name. You ask again. This time he says he is returning from a private meal. The answer has changed the encounter. The official servant's changing answer weighs more heavily than the name of the superior he keeps repeating. Office connection is not itself a lawful errand. You keep the exchange measured. The servant is not mocked for his position, and you do not pretend that a uniformed connection to an office has no practical weight. Scholarship shows the opposite. Attendants and lower functionaries tied to powerful institutions often stood at the center of curfew disputes. Some relied on the prestige of their employers. Patrol officials could face insults, assault, confinement, or later retaliation. Those facts explain the caution on both sides of your stance. Your companion calls another patrol with the clapper. The servant hears the reply and steps back from the direct challenge. You ask whether anyone at his office will certify that he was on duty. He says no, because he was not. The cleanest decision is now available. He will accompany you to the watch post, where his name, office, time, and explanation can be recorded. He may speak to the responsible officer there. The servant complains, but he does not resist. You do not announce a punishment. Patrolmen apprehend. Later authority determines consequence. By keeping witnesses and writing the circumstances, you reduce the space for both private intimidation and patrol abuse. The servant walks beside your companion. The servant's calm compliance allows the patrol to use procedure instead of force, which is a meaningful difference. You hold the lantern ahead, giving all three men enough light to see the next turn. At the watch post, the clerk recognizes the servant's employer and becomes more careful, not less. He asks the patrol to state the facts in order. Time of stop, place, direction of travel, whether a permit was shown, whether the man resisted, whether the office could confirm duty. The questions protect the record from becoming an argument about reputation. The servant gives his own account and admits the meal was private. He adds that he believed his office connection would allow the walk. That belief is historically plausible in a system where institutional attendants sometimes claimed broad privilege, but plausibility does not turn it into permission. The clerk writes, "A supervising officer will decide whether to hold the man until morning and what report to send." You have completed your part without pretending the outcome is automatic. The servant sits near the brazier, still annoyed, and accepts water. The scene remains ordinary enough to resist melodrama. Curfew enforcement could become violent, but this encounter does not need invented violence to reveal the imbalance. A patrolman with legal duty may still fear the office behind a violator. A servant with office protection may still find that a careful record narrows his advantage. Ink does not make power disappear. The clerk's ordered questions give the office servant a chance to state his account beside the patrol report. It gives tomorrow something more solid than competing memories. You step out of the watch post with one fewer moving figure and a clearer sense of the night's remaining route. The cold air closes around the lantern again. Near the government quarter, a pair of guards change position after a watch signal. One receives a spoken report from the other before taking the corner. Their exchange is short because both know the boundaries of the post. The city is not guarded by one patrol service moving in a perfect circle. Different organizations and duty systems overlap. sometimes support one another, and sometimes dispute authority. The scholarly abstracts describe police, patrol offices, and military commands dividing districts. Another historical account sets patrol assignments by successive night watches. Details changed across time, yet the governing problem remained recognizable. Place enough responsible adults in enough places, tell them when their duty begins, and make their reports meet somewhere. You and your companion pass the new guard and receive his acknowledgement. No traveller appears. The absence of an incident is not empty narration. It is the result the system wanted. Streets where necessary movement is identifiable and casual movement is reduced. Still, the capital contains awake people behind walls, guards at doors, timekeepers near instruments, and messengers with legitimate work. Night order is not silence. The new guard's acknowledgement closes one small gap between organizations that do not always share equal status. It is activity narrowed into channels. The route climbs enough to expose a strip of the wall beneath the night sky. You can follow its line for a short distance before roofs hide it again. The wall encloses palaces, offices, shrines, markets, homes, and a population whose daily movements cannot be represented by the stone alone. At the gates, closure controls crossing. Inside, patrols make the prohibition visible. At households, bolts and doors translate the public signal into private routine. These layers explain why the title's locked capital is both true and incomplete. Hanyang was deliberately made harder to enter, leave, or traverse without cause after the evening signal, but it was never a single box with one lid. The wall did not stop every outer road. The bell did not make every resident act at the same second. The patrol did not treat every status and document in one identical way. The most defensible description is a nightly governing system, strong enough to alter the city and flexible enough to generate exceptions, disputes, and reforms. You rest the lantern briefly on a wall ledge and check the oil. The flame is lower but steady. Your companion listens for the next answer. The lantern flame remains steady after the oil check, and the patrolman's route returns to familiar pace. When it comes, both of you resume the descent toward the eastern lanes. In the eastern lane, you meet the patrol that received the messenger with the old permit. The lawful errand has been completed. The receiving office accepted the roster and added its own notation before sending the man back under escort. He now stands with the other patrol, quieter than before, holding the same paper with 2 fresh marks. This return is important. A permit is not a permanent release from the city's night rules. It authorizes a bounded task, and the patrol system can carry responsibility outward and back. The messenger thanks the men who escorted him, but hesitates before thanking you. Then he inclines his head. You return the gesture. No friendship is required. The record is sufficient. The patrol leader reports that the receiving office also complained about the old form and will request replacements. A single lantern inspection has exposed a small administrative weakness and produced a modest correction. That is a defensible human payoff. Not because bureaucracy has become perfect, but because no one needed to be punished for doing necessary work, and no patrolman had to pretend that an irregular paper was unquestionably valid. The messenger turns toward his compound with an escort. The messenger's 2 fresh marks make the permit easier for the return patrol to understand without another full dispute. You turn toward the final third of your round. Your companion asks whether you would have detained the messenger if the clerk's roster had not included his name. You answer that you would have taken him to the watch post and recorded the old permit, the issuing office, and his claim of urgency. The answer sounds obvious now because the verification succeeded. Earlier, in lantern light, it was a real choice. That is the human heart of the system. Laws and signals establish the frame, but patrolmen still decide how to move from uncertainty toward a responsible outcome. Detention, escort, passage, and referral are not interchangeable. Each changes what happens to a person and to the officials who must answer later. The archives preserve conflicts because judgment could fail, power could intrude, and permits could be abused. They also imply countless decisions that left no scandal. You reach a corner where 3 routes meet. The neighboring patrol has already marked the ground beside the wall to show it passed. Your companion adds the agreed sign for your route. The city does not need to know your names for the work to be real. The ground mark at the 3-way corner carries a simple message. This route has been walked and handed onward. It needs the next patrol to know that this section has been walked, this gate checked, and this question resolved. The next watch approaches. Signals travel from station to station, and patrols prepare to shift duties. You and your companion do not simply stop when a distant sound reaches you. You finish the assigned segment, report the 2 encounters, and identify the repaired household gate and replaced storehouse lamp. The incoming men need to know which issues are closed and which may recur. The old permit is now supported and marked. The office servant remains at the watch post for review. The market shutterboard is wedged and reported. Nothing is left as a mysterious shape in the darkness. This habit of resolution is what keeps the night from turning into a chain of suspense. Historical governance may be imperfect without every scene ending in uncertainty. At a small post, the incoming leader reads your notes and asks one question about the permit's issuing office. You answer. He adds that another old form appeared the previous week. The pattern is broader than one traveller, which supports the clerk's request for replacement. Then he signs the handover. Your route is not finished, but responsibility for the central lanes has moved to another group. The incoming leader receives each resolved item with its consequence, keeping closed problems from reopening as rumours. You continue along the wallward section with fewer questions and a gentler pace. You walk beside a row of closed household gates. Each belongs to a different family, workshop, lodging, or courtyard. Yet the repeated wood creates a steady visual rhythm. The public bell has done its work here without entering any house. People heard the signal and adjusted their own thresholds. Seoul's heritage account makes that connection directly. Private gates opened and closed according to the city bell, so the schedule of the city gates shaped the rhythm of residents' lives. The statement is broad, and real households must have varied, as the stuck hinge already showed. Still, the ordinary relationship is clear. A state time signal becomes a hand on a bolt. You pass one doorway where a lamp remains beside the frame, perhaps for an expected authorized return. You do not invent the household's reason. The gate is shut, no one is moving in the lane, and the light creates no offense. Your companion's clapper is silent for several minutes. The lack of repeated sound lets the wall, gate, lantern, and doorway settle into familiar objects rather than fresh information. The lamps behind the private gates vary, yet every closed threshold now belongs to the same broad nightly rhythm. At the end of the row, you turn back toward the watch post, where the round will be logged. The watch post clerk receives the final report. You give him the route in order, not as a collection of dramatic moments. Closing signal heard. Main lane covered. Old permit checked against the issuing officer's roster. Messenger escorted and returned. Unpermitted private traveller delivered without resistance. Household hinge repaired. Storehouse lamp replaced. District handover completed. The list shows what the patrol actually does. It turns a general night restriction into many small observations and decisions. The clerk compares your entries with those of adjoining patrols. The clapper calls line up closely enough. No segment is missing. He asks you to correct one character in the name of the issuing office, because tomorrow's reader will need the office identified correctly. You correct it. The record is closed for this watch. Outside, another patrol passes and sounds its clapper. The answer comes from farther away. Human action continues beyond your shift, but the title story has paid its promise. The corrected office name prevents tomorrow's reader from turning a useful record into another disputed document. Joseon's capital was deliberately reorganized after the evening signal, not literally at sunset. and the boundary between forbidden and permitted movement was negotiated through gates, patrols, permits, status, place, and circumstance. You step away from the desk and return the borrowed brush. The traveller with the old permit is no longer your responsibility. The servant from the private meal is not left as a cliffhanger. His case belongs to the supervising officer, with the facts recorded and no invented sentence added here. Your own ordinary goal was to complete the round, listen for the neighbouring clappers, and decide whether the moving figure had lawful reason to be outside. That goal is complete. The most important decision was not to choose softness over order, or order over mercy. It was to replace a guess with verification. An irregular permit became a documented authorized journey. A private claim of office privilege became a recorded detention. The same nightly system produced different outcomes because the facts differed. You warm your hands near the post brazier for a moment, then stand when the next duty calls. The city gates remain shut. The households remain behind their doors. Patrols still move. The patrolman's warmed hands return to the lantern, but the main uncertainty of the night has already been settled. A government can announce a rule with 28 strokes, but the rule lives through adults who must hear, interpret, and apply it, without pretending that paper, rank, and urgency always agree. Before you leave the district, you carry the post summary to the guard responsible for the nearby approach to a city gate. The route narrows as it nears the fortified opening. Even from inside, the gate feels different from a household door. Its mass belongs to the wall, its schedule to the city, and its key to an assigned chain of responsibility. The guard receives your note and adds it to his own watch record. He has spent the evening on the other side of the same city-wide command. While you judged movement within the streets, he helped turn an open passage into a closed boundary, and must keep it that way until the morning signal. A covered lamp stands near the locking mechanism. The key is present. The men are tired but alert. You hear them discussing a part that dragged during closure and should be checked before dawn. The patrolman's story settles into theirs without a new ritual or announcement. You leave the lantern light of the post and follow the guard's attention toward the gate. The gate guard reads the patrol summary, because street decisions and gate decisions belong to the same capital order. The wooden leaves are closed, the bar is seated, and one ordinary mechanical problem is waiting for the adults who must open the capital again. The patrol clapper sounds once behind you as responsibility passes forward. At the gate, the guard tests the key without turning it fully, checks the lamp, and places the patrol summary beside his own notes. Nothing in the scene rises into danger. The interest shifts from who may move through the streets to how a massive public threshold is kept closed and later reopened. The wall's stone remains still, but the gate requires people, procedure, tools, verification, and memory. A lost key can become an official case. A delayed opening can become an inquiry. An emergency request cannot be answered by sympathy alone. The guard touches the locking hardware where it resisted earlier and decides that the first task of the long shut hours is to understand the drag before it surprises the dawn crew. You remain with him. The patrolman's lantern recedes down the lane, accompanied by one last wooden answer from another route. The key, bar, lamp, and written note gather the next story around one threshold rather than around another traveller. Ahead, the covered gate lamp reveals the key, the bar, and the tired hands that must keep a city boundary dependable through the night. You remain at Hyunginjimmun, the Great Eastern Gate, after the patrol's lantern has vanished. The adult guard you follow has already helped close it, but his ordinary goal extends through the night. Keep the passage secure, preserve the key and the procedure, answer any lawful emergency, and reopen when the morning signal requires it. The closing itself involved more than a dramatic shove. Men cleared the threshold, moved the gate leaves, seated the fastening members, managed the key, and confirmed that the public passage had changed condition. Central sound governed the schedule, while assigned bodies performed the work. Hanyang had 4 main and 4 auxiliary gates, each a controlled point through the wall. A gate guard did not own the decision to open one merely because he stood nearest the lock. Rules, supervisors, and verification stood behind his hands. Tonight the key has turned, yet the mechanism dragged near the end. The guard bends beside the covered footlamp and examines what he can without undoing the closure. He does not force the key again. A stubborn mechanism is not heroic, but it has excellent access to the morning schedule. Another guard holds the lamp closer. The guard places the chalk beside the lamp rather than in a pocket, leaving the sign available to every watch that follows. His first useful decision is to make the resistance visible before anyone is pressed by an opening order. Together they agree to inspect the key and visible fitting at the next internal check, while leaving the bar and closure undisturbed. You follow the guard along the inside face of the gate. The task is procedural, not architectural sightseeing. He checks the points assigned to his watch, confirms the lamp supply, and exchanges a short report with the man responsible for the key. The key is present. That simple fact is worth stating because official records preserved the opposite. Seoul Museum exhibitions on city gate management use chronicles, Royal Secretariat diaries, and other records to reconstruct incidents in which guards lost a gate key, people obstructed closure, or a gate opened late. Legal and administrative compilations included punishment provisions for negligent management. The public exhibition notice confirms that consequences followed, but it does not give enough detail to claim a specific number for every case. So this guard does not imagine a sentence. He understands only that a missing key would become more than a private embarrassment. It would delay the city, trigger inquiry, and place names in a record. He asks the keykeeper to show the cord and storage place once more. The keykeeper does so with visible patience. They have checked it already. They check again because a gate that cannot open at dawn turns yesterday's carelessness into tomorrow's public obstruction. The keykeeper points to the exact storage place and names the officer who will receive custody at the next watch. The answer is entered beside the inspection, turning repeated checking into a traceable handover. The key returns to its assigned place, and both men sign the watch note. The guard next examines the part that dragged during closure. He cannot dismantle the mechanism while the gate is secured, and no source gives us license to invent a specialized repair ritual. He can look, clean away loose grit at the accessible edge, and compare the key's movement with the keeper's memory. The keeper says the resistance began only on the final turn. A third man reports that the gate leaf settled heavily after a cart crossed the threshold. The explanation may lie in alignment rather than the key itself. They mark the point with a small chalk line so the dawn crew will know where to watch. This is plausible staging, kept deliberately modest. The documented history is that gate operation had procedures, designated guards, keys, verification devices, and consequences when management failed. The guard's action tonight is simply competent maintenance within those limits. Outside the gate, the road continues toward villages and fields. Inside, the shut passage holds back movement that would otherwise pour directly into the capital. The wall is not patrolled by the key alone. Men remain at posts, signals continue, and the gatehouse receives reports. Loose grit is brushed from the accessible edge and collected rather than pushed deeper. The men compare the gate leaf's resting line with the mark left at closure, then stop before guesswork becomes damage. The keykeeper wraps his hands, looks at the chalk mark, and says the lock has chosen a fine hour to develop an opinion. You settle into the first shut hours with the guard, though settle does not mean stop. He walks the short circuit assigned to him, returns to the gate, listens for watch signals, and confirms that the outside sentry has answered from his protected position. The central evening signal has finished, but the city's time system continues through smaller sounds marking the watches. Those sounds coordinate patrols and duty changes. At a gate, they also prevent the long night from becoming one undivided stretch in which responsibility blurs. Each handover carries the same basic questions. Is the gate secure? Is the key present? Has anyone requested passage? Has any fitting changed? Has a report arrived from inside or outside? The outgoing man states that no request has come. The incoming man repeats the condition of the lock and touches the chalk mark, so he knows exactly where the concern lies. You hear the report twice, once given and once received. Repetition in procedure is not the same as repetition in narration. It is how tired people keep a public threshold from depending on memory alone. The incoming guard walks the same short circuit before accepting the post. He sees the lamp, key position, chalk mark, and clear approach for himself, so the spoken handover is joined to direct observation. The guard takes the next position near the inner approach, where he can see anyone arriving from the capital before that person reaches the closed leaves. A covered lantern appears down the inner approach. The person carrying it walks with 2 attendants and stops at the guard's call. The leader identifies himself as an official messenger and asks for emergency opening. He does not merely wave a paper. Gate-specific buhyum were used for opening in an emergency, according to the Seoul Museum of History exhibition. The term refers to an official verification device or tally. The exhibition confirms their use, but does not justify a detailed invented description of material, color, or exact shape. The messenger produces the required item and a written order. The guard receives neither as self-proving. He summons the officer responsible for comparison and records the time of request. The messenger says, "Delay matters." The guard answers that the verification exists because delay and danger both matter. No one raises a voice. The gate remains shut while the corresponding authority is brought from its secure place. This is the difference between an emergency procedure and an informal favor. The system allows exceptional opening, but it transfers the decision into a more exact chain. The messenger keeps his written order visible while the responsible officer is summoned. His attendants remain behind him, and the gate guard notes that no additional person is asking to pass under the same authority. You stand beside the guard as the messenger's lantern, the gate lamp, and the approaching officer's light form 3 separate pools on the ground. The responsible officer arrives and compares the messenger's buhyum with the gate's reference. He checks the written order, the issuing authority, and the named destination outside the wall. The 2 attendants are listed. The request is not for a private convenience, but for official duty. You do not invent the contents beyond that, because the procedure is the historical point. A lawful emergency can pass, but only after the people at the gate convert a claim into verified responsibility. The officer orders a controlled opening. Guards take assigned positions. The keykeeper brings the key. The dragging mechanism now matters sooner than dawn. He inserts the key and turns only to the marked resistance. The guard watches the alignment while another man supports the movement of the fastening member. The key hesitates, then advances without force. The chalk mark has made the earlier observation useful. The bar is moved enough for the authorized passage, and the gate opens only as far as the procedure requires. The messenger and attendants cross. Their names, order, verification, and time are entered before the gate is secured again. The men move only after the officer states the result of the comparison aloud. That spoken confirmation gives the keykeeper, the guards, and the record clerk the same basis for action. An enormous wall has made an exception through a sequence of very small confirmations. You watch the gate close after the emergency party. The men reverse the procedure carefully rather than rushing to prove the mechanism is sound. The leaf returns, the fastening settles, and the key reaches the same point of resistance. This time the keykeeper pauses, adjusts pressure in coordination with the guard watching alignment, and completes the turn. No hidden trick is claimed. The practical lesson is simply that the problem is repeatable and manageable when several men attend to it. They add a second note beside the chalk mark. The outside sentry confirms that the authorized party has taken the road named in the order. The officer seals nothing in the narration because the open sources support a verification device, not an invented sealing ritual for this exact moment. Instead, he closes the written entry with his name. The gate is secure again. The messenger's urgency has been answered without teaching the guards that any urgent voice should open the city. You feel the story's question taking shape. What did closure require? Once the gate is secured again, the guard checks the inner and outer acknowledgements separately. The verified party is outside, the opening is closed, and no follower has entered the gap created for the official passage. It required mass and hardware, certainly, but also assigned authority, communication, comparison, witnesses, and a record strong enough to survive the morning review. The guard returns to his circuit. Outside, the messenger's light diminishes along the road. Inside, no one celebrates. A successful emergency opening is supposed to become an entry in a register, not a tale of daring. The keykeeper sits near the lamp and rubs the hand that managed the resistant turn. The officer asks whether the lock should be replaced before dawn. The men cannot answer from the evidence available. They can prepare. A spare set of tools is brought near. Not because a particular tool is documented for this case, but because basic readiness is plausible and low stakes. A runner carries notice to the supervising office that the gate opened lawfully and that the lock dragged twice. The gate remains guarded. The next watch will receive the same information. In official records, trouble often becomes visible when a key is lost or opening is late. Ordinary nights leave fewer details. By following this guard, you see the quiet work that prevents an incident from becoming record-worthy. He does not conquer the gate. The runner carrying the maintenance notice repeats the lock's condition back to the gate crew before leaving. This small return message reduces the chance that the supervising office receives only a vague complaint about a difficult key. He keeps checking it, which is less glamorous and much closer to the needs of a capital that expects to move again at dawn. A patrol arrives from the inner streets with a brief report. One authorized messenger passed toward the gate earlier, and should have been the man just admitted. The names match. This backward confirmation links the gate's verification to the patrol network inside. The guard records it beside the emergency entry. City security did not depend on a single checkpoint knowing everything. Information moved between posts, patrols, offices, and gates. Where the chain worked, one group's observation supported another's decision. Where it failed, confusion could become delay or abuse. The patrol also reports that no crowd followed the messenger and no one attempted to use the opening. The guard thanks them and checks the inner approach after they leave. The key remains present, the gate remains shut, the chalk mark remains visible. The sequence sounds repetitive because dependable gate work is repetitive by design, but each pass carries new information. Earlier, the key's drag was an unexplained friction. Now it has been tested under an authorized opening and reported to a supervisor. The problem is smaller because it has a history that the next adults can read. The patrol leader signs beside the gate entry, joining his earlier citing of the messenger to the guard's record of passage. Two posts now preserve matching parts of the same lawful movement. You remain close to the guard's pace as the night moves into a later watch. The later watch is colder. The guard changes the cloth around his hands and accepts a cup of warm water. He does not leave the gate to become a general portrait of Hosa nightlife. The camera stays where his goal remains. A gate must stay closed against unauthorized passage and still be ready to open lawfully. That double duty explains the seriousness of keys and timing. Losing a key does not merely misplace an object. It interrupts the state's ability to control a major threshold. Obstructing closure does not merely annoy a guard. It extends uncontrolled movement past the signal. Opening late does not merely inconvenience early travelers. It breaks the announced rhythm on which officials, workers, households, and roads depend. Museum exhibits selected those failures because each reveals the gate as an operating institution. The guard looks toward the lock and then toward the road beyond, unseen behind the leaves. He has no reason to open again. His work is to keep the possibility ready without using it. The guard looks at the closed leaves while the keykeeper rests. Their stillness is the intended result of several active checks, not evidence that the night duty has become unnecessary. A gatekeeper's night is therefore filled with restrained action, checking, receiving, refusing, verifying, recording, and waiting until the next action is due. A sound comes from the outer side, not the agreed sentry call. The guard signals for attention and asks the outside man to identify the source. The answer returns after a pause. A cart has reached the closed gate late, and its driver is asking to wait near the approach until Paru, the dawn release signal. There is no emergency order and no buhum. The gate will not open. The outside sentry directs the cart to a safe waiting position where it does not block the entrance. This is a refusal, but not a punishment. The driver arrived after closure and must wait for morning. The guard records the presence because the dawn crew should expect the cart when the gate opens. No one pretends the wall has made the driver disappear. The outside road still holds people, animals, loads and delays. The closed gate converts late arrival into waiting. Inside, the guard hears only fragments of the sentry's instructions. He does not invent the driver's story or turn the inconvenience into comedy. The title story has already shown how permits complicate movement within the walls. Here the absence of emergency authority makes the gate decision simpler. The cart remains outside. The outside sentry reports the cart's position once more after it settles. The driver has room to wait, the approach remains clear, and the gate crew can prepare for dawn without an unseen obstruction. The key remains where it belongs. The guard checks the opening schedule in the duty record. Institutional summaries commonly give Peru around 4 in the morning, though another late Gozen study frames the curfew to 5, and traditional watch divisions shifted with period and seasonal practice. The script does not force those sources into false precision. The gate will open when the recognized morning signal for this setting arrives. That is the operational truth the guard follows. He does not consult a modern clock. He listens for the chain of sound and watches the duty sequence around him. The cart outside will hear the same release. Households inside will begin opening their own gates. Patrol shifts will change. Palace attendants will move into dawn routines. One signal will again become many actions. Before that, the resistant lock must be handled. The supervising officer sends a more experienced keykeeper from another post to examine the problem without compromising closure. The newcomer studies the visible alignment and compares the key's seating. He recommends cleaning the accessible channel and preparing 2 men to steady the fastening member at dawn. No replacement is attempted in the shut hours. The experienced keeper asks when the drag first appeared and whether it changed after the emergency opening. The answers are added in sequence, giving the morning inspection a usable history rather than a collection of impressions. The plan is written, witnessed, and left with the gate crew. You follow the guard through another handover. The incoming watch repeats the emergency opening, the late cart, the lock resistance, and the dawn plan. The experienced keykeeper demonstrates where the 2 men should stand. He does not dramatize the instruction. One supports the fastening member. One turns the key evenly. A third watches the gate leaf. The guard who first noticed the drag remains responsible for reporting whether it changes. The arrangement has a quiet elegance. A citywide schedule meets a local mechanical problem, and the answer is neither panic nor denial. It is more eyes and a written sequence. The men test only what can be tested without opening. The key enters fully but does not turn. Its seating is correct. They remove it and confirm no visible damage. Then it returns to custody. The gate lamp is trimmed. Outside, the cart driver speaks softly to his animal. Inside, the guard resumes his post. The night has reached the point where each new action is less novel, but the story continues toward a practical payoff. The incoming men repeat the support positions in their own words. By making each person describe his task, the supervisor discovers confusion before the key is in the lock, and the waiting road begins to press forward. The gate must open on time, and the people who will do it now share the same plan. Another official request approaches from inside, but this one is not an emergency opening. A runner brings notice that a senior party will pass through after Paru, and asks the gate to avoid delay. The guard accepts the notice, verifies the issuing office through the established chain, and records the expected group. He does not open early. Rank changes the amount of attention, not the signal itself. This distinction is important because status could complicate enforcement in practice. Yet the gate schedule remained a public rule backed by procedure. The guard assigns one man to keep the approach clear near dawn. The late cart outside will be admitted in order, without obstructing the official party. A small queue is forming on two sides of a closed threshold that neither side can see. The keykeeper reviews the plan once more. The guard checks the chalk mark. The bureaucracy has now arranged the morning around a lock that may work perfectly, which is often what preparation looks like. No joke is needed. The official notice is placed with the dawn papers, rather than with emergency orders. The distinction keeps expected rank from borrowing the authority of an urgent night opening. The interest lies in tired people reducing the number of things that can surprise them when the signal arrives. The guard receives the next watch sound and notices that the eastern sky beyond the gate is not visible from his position. Dawn will reach him first as procedure and sound, not as a landscape. He walks to the inner approach and confirms that waiting officials have not arrived too early. A sweeper clears loose debris from the path near the threshold. This is ordinary preparation, not a claim about a named historical shift. The late cart remains outside. The authorized senior party is still within the city. The gate crew has time to position itself around the mechanism. The experienced keykeeper returns. Each man states his role. The written note is read aloud. They will wait for Paru, remove the bar in sequence, steady the fitting, and turn the key without force. The guard's night has become a study in anticipation. He has kept the gate shut, answered one verified emergency, refused one ordinary late request, and carried a mechanical problem forward without losing the object at the center of it. The key hangs where assigned, the lamp illuminates it, the sweeper moves debris away from the threshold, and then leaves the mechanism alone. The preparation clears the crew's footing without pretending that ordinary cleaning can diagnose the source of the resistance. The wall around the gate remains quiet, while human attention gathers for the moment when quiet must become movement. The first part of the morning signal reaches the gate through the chain of sound. The men do not move on a rumor of it. They listen for the recognized sequence and answer from their post. Then the order to open passes through the responsible officer. The bar is handled. The keykeeper inserts the key. Two men steady the fastening member at the marked point. The turn begins smoothly, reaches the familiar drag, and pauses. No one jerks the mechanism. The supporting men adjust their hold. The key turns through. The lock releases. The gate leaf begins to move under controlled effort. The small procedural problem is solved by exactly the people who spent the night observing it. There is no miracle and no hidden repair. Preparation prevents resistance from becoming delay. Outside, the cart driver waits until signaled. Inside, the early official party is guided into order. The gate opens far enough for the morning flow. The guard watches the threshold and confirms that the key has come free, intact and present. The recognized signal is repeated by the responsible officer before the bar moves. The crew's preparation has been waiting for this authority, not for the first hint of light or the first impatient voice outside. One stubborn point in the mechanism has met a larger persistence in the crew. Movement resumes in sequence. The late cart enters after its waiting position is cleared. The driver passes without a speech, carrying the delay with him into the city. The senior party exits under the notice already received. Pedestrians approach from both sides, and guards maintain the threshold until the first pressure eases. The opening of a gate is not the abandonment of control. It is a change from night restriction to managed daytime passage. The guard who followed the lock's problem records that the key turned after coordinated support, and that no delay occurred. The experienced keeper recommends inspection during the day. when the gate can be serviced without confusing emergency and routine authority. The recommendation enters the record. This ending is intentionally procedural. Historical gate incidents often became visible because something failed: a lost key, obstructed closure, a late opening, an assault. Here the small problem is solved because tired adults preserved information across watches. The gate stands open. The key remains accounted for. As the cart crosses, the guard watches the wheels clear the marked fitting. The senior party then passes in the opposite direction, showing the reopened threshold handling different morning movements without confusion. The guard's ordinary goal is complete. You stay near the guard while the dawn crew assumes the post. He gives the final handover. Emergency party admitted under verified authority. Late cart held outside. Senior party notified. Lock resistance managed. Daytime inspection requested. The new crew repeats the essentials. The old crew can now leave without carrying an unresolved public threshold behind them. The gate itself has not changed its appearance greatly. What has changed is its state, from shut to open, and the record of how that transition was managed. The story's answer is complete. Closing a capital gate required physical effort, keys, assigned watches, emergency verification, refusal of unsupported requests, and accountability for mistakes. It depended on human procedure as much as on walls. The guard steps away from the lamp. Behind him, feet cross the threshold in ordinary numbers. Ahead, the city is already responding to the same morning sound that released the gate. The outgoing guard points to the written maintenance request and waits until the day supervisor reads it. Responsibility changes only after the unresolved technical work is named and accepted. The next story follows that sound backward, from the people who hear it to the adults who must measure, relay, and count it. The guard walks a short distance inside the wall before turning toward his quarters. He hears another gate's response carried faintly through the city, not as a perfectly synchronized echo but as part of the same public mourning. Private doorways begin to open. A patrol returns toward its post. A worker lifts a bar from a workshop gate. Each action is separate, joined by the time signal rather than by direct command. The tired guard no longer needs to count who crosses his threshold. That responsibility belongs to the new watch. He carries only the memory of the lock's resistance and the relief of a key that turned when required. The scene lowers its detail without losing movement. One man finishes a shift, another begins. The open gate receives footsteps. The household worker near the wall opens a private gate after the public release, echoing the city gate on a smaller scale without confusing the two mechanisms or their authorities. Farther toward the court, a timekeeper's duty is ending at the same moment his signal is creating work everywhere else. The gatekeeper does not leave immediately. Daylight makes the lock easier to inspect, and he remains long enough to show the dragging point to the daytime supervisor. The key is inserted under ordinary open gate conditions. The resistance appears again near the same place. A craftsman attached to the gate's maintenance is summoned, and the guard describes only what he observed. When the drag began, how the fitting was supported, and whether the emergency opening changed it. He does not offer a theory beyond his evidence. The craftsman checks the accessible parts and concludes that a fuller inspection can occur without delaying passage. The gate stays open under guard, while the mechanism is examined in sequence. This brief daylight continuation matters because procedural problems are not solved merely when they fail to cause disaster. They are carried into maintenance. The night crew's chalk mark and written notes give the day crew a starting point. Information crosses the watch just as travelers cross the threshold. The daylight supervisor tests the resistance under conditions that no longer require emergency judgment. The guard's observations remain valuable because they specify when the problem appeared and how the crew avoided delay. The gatekeeper signs his final line and sees the supervisor accept responsibility for the repair. He returns the covered lamp to its place and confirms the key one final time. The object is no longer his responsibility, but the habit of checking does not disappear at the edge of a shift. The keykeeper names the new custodian. The new custodian answers. The record receives both names. Such formality may seem larger than the object until you remember what the key controls. Beyond the open gate, the cart that waited through the night has already vanished into the streets. The official party is beyond the wall. Ordinary pedestrians pass without knowing that the mechanism resisted twice before dawn. Successful public procedure often leaves the public with nothing more dramatic than a gate that opens when expected. The guard steps away from the threshold, his shoulders lower. The wall continues on either side, but his assigned night has a clear end. The new custodian places the key in the assigned position and states that it is received intact. The departing guard can now leave without carrying private uncertainty about an object that controls public passage. He walks into the city with the morning flow rather than against it. As he turns down the inner road, the gate bell and the farther city signals remain behind him. Doorways open one by one. A workshop worker sets out a broom. A household carries a small bundle across its threshold. The guard's night resolves into these uncomplicated movements. He kept the gate shut, admitted one verified emergency, refused unsupported passage, prepared for the dawn turn, and handed the maintenance problem forward. No tour of towers is needed. The people and the procedure have answered the question. Now the sound that ordered their work becomes the next human thread. Near the court, an adult signal soldier has spent the same hours watching measured time become instruction. The gatekeeper's final glance rests on the open threshold rather than on the wall above it. His story has stayed with the people who made closure and reopening work, exactly where the practical question was answered. The gatekeeper walks away while that soldier checks the last indication of the water clock and waits for the final answer from the bell tower. You remain near the court as the adult signal soldier studies the standard water clock. His ordinary goal is narrower than the effect of his work. Receive the correct indication, pass it onward without confusion, and make sure the next station answers. We will call the evening signal Ingyong, one common English romanization for the curfew signal. Other sources spell the Korean term differently, and the variation belongs to translation rather than to a perfectly uniform English label. Paru is the dawn release signal. The soldier does not need the argument over spelling. He needs the measured time. Water moves through the clock's vessels according to a controlled system. In the Sejong period, an automatic water clock was created to make time audible through mechanical action, though the signaling arrangements and surviving instruments changed over the centuries. Tonight's soldier watches the official indication and prepares the human relay around it. The clock does not ring every city gate by itself. Its reading must become a call, then another call, then the great public sound that reaches walls, streets, posts, and homes. The responsible official stands beside him and confirms the reading before the call is given. This shared observation keeps the soldier from becoming a solitary master of the hour. The instrument supplies a standard, while the office supplies witnesses and a chain for passing it outward. The soldier also checks that the written watch label matches the current sequence, preventing a correct signal from being attached to the wrong interval. The soldier checks the assigned instrument, looks toward the next position, and waits for the precise moment when observation becomes action. The indication arrives. The soldier gives the expected signal to the next station. Another adult receives it and answers. From the palace clock area, the message travels toward larger instruments and the central bell tower through a chain designed to reduce mistakes. The National Institute of Korean History describes officials reading the standard water clock, signals passing through stations near Gwanghwamun and intermediate points, and the bellkeeper listening for the transmitted sound. This is not a wire carrying an identical pulse. It is a sequence of human hearings. Each person must know what is expected, distinguish the call, and respond in time. The soldier watches for the answer, rather than assuming his duty ended when he struck. It comes from the correct direction. He records the handoff. A city-wide rhythm has begun in a room where only a few people can see the instrument. Outside, no household knows the water level. Gate guards do not inspect the clock. Patrolmen do not crowd around its vessels. They trust a relay whose reliability is made from repeated confirmation. The first answer is written with its direction and sequence. The soldier then turns his attention toward the second station, because a relay is complete only when the next adult has received the signal and made that receipt known. The answering station repeats the call in full, giving the court post evidence of reception rather than a faint sound that might be accidental. The soldier turns to the next part of his duty, listening as the sound moves farther from the court. You follow the signal outward in attention, rather than leaving the soldier behind. He remains the camera anchor, receiving reports as later stations answer. The central system has a practical weakness. Sound diminishes, changes in wind, and competes with walls, roofs, fires, voices, and other instruments. Historical accounts describe intermediate gongs or drums between the palace area and the bell tower, along with relay posts in busy districts and near palaces. The purpose was not ornamental grandeur. It was to keep one missed sound from shifting patrol watches or gate operations. The soldier counts the expected answers. He does not count because numbers are soothing in themselves. He counts because 27 evening strokes would be a public mistake, and the city has not provided a quiet method for pretending otherwise. The dry comparison ends there. The tired adult must hear correctly. Another station answers. The soldier marks it. Farther away, the bellkeeper prepares the great bell. The bronze object has its own history of casting and movement, but tonight its important quality is simple. He separates the main count from the smaller acknowledgements that accompany it. The task demands concentration without hurry. One sound announces the city's condition, while another confirms that the instruction has moved through the expected part of the chain. He keeps the striker at rest between required calls, preserving the rhythm that lets distant listeners separate official signals from ordinary noise. It can make the measured decision of the court audible to people who will never see the clock. The bellkeeper receives the signal and begins the evening count. One stroke leaves the tower, then another. The familiar total is 28. The Academy of Korean Studies connects the count with the 28 celestial lodges, while the Encyclopedia of Korean Culture also gives a religious and cosmological explanation. Those institutional accounts support the broad symbolism, but the soldier does not pause to unfold every layer. He listens to the counter's work. The strokes announce Young, the nightly settling of public movement, and the closing schedule of the gates. Around 10 o'clock is the useful modern approximation in several institutional descriptions, not the instant when the sun crosses the horizon. Each stroke gives gate crews time to complete the operation already in progress. Patrols position themselves. Households recognize that their own thresholds should close. Palace routines turn toward the night. The signal's power lies less in any single sound than in the common expectation attached to the sequence. At the gate tower, the first men hearing the count do not wait for all 28 strokes before becoming attentive. They prepare through the sequence and complete closure on the recognized command, keeping anticipation distinct from premature action. By the later strokes, gate crews know the count remains complete, and their final movements align with a sequence heard across several posts. The soldier hears the middle strokes and checks that no interruption has broken the count. As the final evening strokes sound, the soldier receives confirmation from the next station. At the gates, men move timbers and keys. In the streets, patrols begin or continue the restricted watch. At private houses, people draw gates closed according to the bell. These actions are linked but not physically identical. The signal does not reach into a courtyard and move a bolt. A householder does that. It does not carry a key across a gatehouse. A keeper does that. It does not inspect a traveler's permit. A patrolman does that. The state tells time and defines the nightly condition. Adults across the capital convert that public information into separate work. You remain near the soldier while reports arrive unevenly. One station answers promptly, another takes longer. The delay is not automatically failure, because distance and local sound matter. He waits for the correct acknowledgement before closing the entry for this sequence. The great bell fades. Smaller instruments continue to structure the watches between Injung and Paru. The soldier's record lists which station answered and whether a repeat was needed. The page will help the next shift distinguish an ordinary delay of sound from a fault that requires attention at a particular relay point. The delayed acknowledgement is marked beside the correct time, so later readers do not mistake a transmission problem for an error in the clock. The soldier's work moves from beginning the night to maintaining its measured divisions. The night is divided into watches and smaller points, rather than one blank interval. Historical accounts describe drums and gongs sounding the watch and point counts, sometimes repeated so guards and patrols could coordinate. The exact arrangements changed. One source notes reforms in the 15th century and different assignments in the 17th. The safe conclusion is not that every century heard an identical nightly score. It is that official time continued after the main evening bell, and that duty organizations used it to change posts and routes. The soldier listens for a watch signal from the next relay. He compares it with the water clock's indication. The answer arrives within the expected interval. A clerk beside him notes the confirmation. Farther through the city, a patrol changes direction at a meeting point. At the gate, a guard gives his handover. In a household, someone checks a banked fire before closing an inner door. The signal chain allows these people to act without sharing one room or one clock. The watches give tired officials smaller units of responsibility. A man accepts a defined interval, performs its calls, and hands it onward. The structure reduces the chance that an entire night rests on one memory growing less certain toward dawn. A defined watch also gives the incoming crew a clear point from which responsibility begins, reducing overlap between men who are both tired. Measured time becomes distributed trust. The soldier moves to the doorway of the time station and listens into the court precinct. His next action is not to follow sound imaginatively through every district. It is to verify whether the nearer relays have answered. The National Institute account describes 18 relay posts in parts of the capital system, especially where smaller sounds needed help reaching busy areas and palace surroundings. 18 is a useful documented number, but it does not mean one fixed arrangement persisted unchanged for all 5 Joseon centuries. The soldier checks the posts assigned in his own setting. A weak answer comes from one direction. He sends the call again. The second answer is clearer. The clerk marks the repetition rather than hiding it. Error control is part of the system, not proof that it never erred. A city that tells time must also admit when the first message was uncertain. The soldier lowers the striker and waits for the next measured point. He sends the repeated signal with the same form as the first, rather than striking harder out of frustration. Consistency gives the distant station something recognizable to answer, and gives the clerk a clear reason to mark the first response uncertain. The clearer second answer is accepted only after its direction matches the assigned station, keeping loudness from becoming the sole test of correctness. His ordinary goal remains complete only when the chain responds, not when he has merely made noise. Hours pass through repeated small duties: water level, indication, signal, answer, note. The sequence reduces novelty while keeping human action alive. The soldier's body grows tired, but the work does not become abstract. He shifts weight, warms his fingers, and checks the instrument with the responsible official. The standard clock belongs to the state because common timing supports more than convenience. Gate schedules, palace attendance, patrol changes, and public order all depend on people agreeing that a boundary of the night has arrived. Early Joseon rulers invested in clocks and time announcements, partly because governing agricultural and administrative life required shared measures. Tonight the effect is concentrated in the capital. A signal soldier near the water clock participates in a chain that reaches a market shutter and an outer gate. He does not know the household that hears him. The household does not know his name. The official beside the clock checks the water supply and the receiving vessel within the established routine. The soldier observes the indication again, then rests his hand until the next point, preserving the difference between readiness and unnecessary motion. The measured pause becomes part of the work. Nothing new happens, yet the soldier remains ready for the indication that will require another relay. Their actions still meet through time. Near the middle of the night, a relay answer arrives later than expected. The soldier checks the water clock before ordering a repeat. The indication is correct. The first station answered. The gap lies farther along. A runner is sent only to the nearest responsible point, not across the whole capital, because each segment has its own duty. The soldier waits. A later answer returns, followed by a brief report that a drum skin or fitting at an intermediate station needed adjustment. The source material does not document this exact minor failure, so the staging remains low stakes and generic. What is supported is the risk of misheard signals and the use of multiple relay points to reduce mistakes. The soldier records the delayed acknowledgement. Patrols in the affected area have not changed watch early, because the repeated signal confirmed the time. The chain has bent without breaking. The runner returns with the local report before the next major boundary of the night. The soldier notes the adjustment and confirms that the affected station can answer again, allowing the chain to continue without carrying an unresolved fault. The local station's restored answer is heard once before the runner leaves, confirming that the report describes a functioning post rather than an intention. He resumes the sequence, carrying the uncertainty forward as a note rather than as suspense. The central bell itself connects different eras. The surviving Boisenkak bronze bell was cast in 1468 for a temple, moved after that temple disappeared, shifted again during the wars of the late 16th century, and installed at a bell tower on Unjonga in 1619. That object history shows why the script should not place one unchanged bell in one unchanged tower from 1392 to 1895. The soldier does not leave his station to admire the bronze. He hears the bell as the current instrument of a continuing public function. Objects move, towers are rebuilt, procedures alter. The city still needs a sound large enough to announce the main boundary of the night. By the later period, the 28 and 33 counts are familiar institutional markers. The soldier hears a distant test from the tower and receives the corresponding acknowledgement. The bellkeeper's own record joins object history to present duty only indirectly. He does not need the bell's full journey to count correctly, but the changing locations remind the listener that institutions survive through replacement and repair. The bell's present duty is entered beside the tower's current location, grounding the public sound in the arrangement of that particular period. The bell's long history enters the story only because it changes what we understand about continuity. Joseon's system persisted through replacement, movement, and revision, rather than through perfect material sameness. The later watches bring the soldier closer to Peru. The dawn count is 33. Institutional sources connect that number with 33 heavens and with hopes for public peace, while also noting changes in whether bell or drum marked the morning at different times. One history account says the dawn instrument shifted from drum to bell in the 15th century. The safest spoken picture is therefore a familiar 33-count release, whose exact instrumentation and timing changed over the long dynasty. The soldier prepares the signal appropriate to his period. He checks the standard clock, receives the official indication, and alerts the first station. The city remains in its night condition until the chain completes. At a gate, the keykeeper waits. At a watch post, a clerk finishes an entry. At a household, a worker has risen but has not yet opened the street door. The measured water reaches the required point. The soldier receives the official dawn indication from the same measured system that governed the previous watches. Preparation does not begin from the color of the sky alone. It begins from the recognized standard and the authority attached to it. The dawn preparation includes checking the receiving station's readiness, because a correct first call is wasted when no adult is listening at the next point. The soldier gives the call. The call passes outward. Intermediate stations answer. The bellkeeper receives the order and begins the dawn count. 33 strokes carry through the capital. Their function is clearer than any single symbolic explanation. Paru releases the curfew and announces that gates may reopen under procedure. The soldier counts along. He knows the sequence by duty, not by meditation. At the main gates, crews act on the recognized signal. Patrols complete their watch records. Palace servants move into the dawn routine. Household gates begin to open. The city does not leap from night to day in one instant. The count gives a shared boundary, and people cross it at the speed of keys, bars, clothing, lamps, and work. The soldier receives an answer from the next station. Another follows. The chain is working. Each answer after Paru confirms another segment has received the release. The soldier does not imagine every gate opening simultaneously. He verifies the chain while crews and households perform their separate actions at the pace of their own thresholds. After the final count, the soldier waits for the last acknowledgement, instead of treating silence after 33 as proof that every district received it. The last part of his ordinary goal is to leave a clear record that the release passed correctly. He records the completion of Paru. One station needed a repeated answer earlier in the night, so he adds that note for the incoming shift. The record does not accuse. It preserves the condition under which the signal was confirmed. This is how the city's time system learns without becoming a legend of perfect precision. The soldier's shift has joined measured water to public sound, and public sound to action. He has not personally closed a gate, stopped a traveller, or opened a household door. His work made those decisions occur on a shared schedule. The payoff is earned through the chain. Joseon's time signal was not merely a bell telling residents what hour it was. The clerk sands the final entry and compares it with the neighbouring station's note. The two records agree on the main count and identify the earlier repeated response, leaving the incoming shift a complete rather than polished account. The completed record preserves a full sequence from measured indication to confirmed public release, which is the administrative shape of a successful dawn. It was a governing instruction carried by adults from instrument to instrument until gates, patrols, palace rooms, streets and homes changed their ordinary work. You follow the soldier only as far as his final handover. The incoming timekeeper checks the water clock, reads the previous notes, and asks about the repeated signal. The outgoing soldier explains the uncertain first answer and the successful confirmation. No unresolved danger remains. The new shift accepts the instrument and the record. The outgoing man steps from the station into the dawn movement his own signal helped begin. He hears the bell's last trace in the distance. A gate is opening, a patrol returns, a palace worker crosses a courtyard. The system becomes visible to him through consequences rather than through the clock itself. The outgoing soldier gives the incoming man the location of the uncertain relay and the result of its later test. The handover preserves both the problem and its resolution, so neither is exaggerated after the night has passed. The outgoing man touches the desk once before leaving, an ordinary gesture that closes his relationship to the instrument for this watch. He walks toward a household near the route, where a door is still closed and ordinary work waits behind it. Inside the household, an adult craft worker has been awake for some time. She has sorted tools by the light of a small lamp and wrapped finished pieces for delivery. The gender of this worker is not used to claim a universal rule about women's night freedom. The stronger evidence here concerns household gates responding to public signals. She waits for Paru, because the street doorway remains closed until the city's morning condition begins. The 33-count release reaches the house through walls and roofs. She stops tying the bundle and listens until the familiar sequence is complete. Then she calls to another adult in the courtyard. Together they lift the bar from the private gate. The public signal has become a household action. No official enters. No patrol gives a personal order. The household worker recognizes the dawn sequence because the public sound has long been joined to ordinary routine. She does not need to see the palace instrument. Her pause at the bundle shows the signal reaching action at the far end of the chain. The worker hears neighboring bolts move only after the public sequence, showing several households responding independently to the same shared boundary. Measured court time arrives as sound, and the household changes its work. The worker carries the wrapped bundle to the threshold, but does not rush into the lane. She checks that the passage is clear, adjusts the cord, and sets the lamp farther inside now that dawn provides enough light. Another household gate opens nearby. A cart passes from the direction of the city wall. The sounds are ordinary and low. Her goal is simply to deliver the finished work after the public release. The signal soldier's goal was to transmit the correct time. Their tasks meet here without either person knowing the other. That is the story's quiet answer. One court clock could order a city because human relays turned measurement into audible instruction, and households trusted the instruction enough to rearrange their own doors and labor. The worker steps into the street. At the threshold, she waits for the other adult to raise the bar evenly. The doorway opens without haste, and the wrapped work remains secure. Public time has altered the household's next permissible movement without entering its private rooms. She places the lifted bar beside the doorway where it can be found again, finishing the opening as a practical household task. Behind her, the gate remains open for the morning. She walks toward the receiving shop while the city grows more active around her. The narration does not add another technical layer. The water clock, relay instruments, bell, gate, patrol, and household doorway have already formed the chain. The worker's bundle moves through a street that was restricted a short time earlier. A clerk at the shop lifts its bar and receives her delivery. He checks the wrapping and places it on a shelf. Her practical goal is complete. She turns home along the same open lane. The receiving clerk places the bundle with other morning work and gives a simple acknowledgement. The craft worker leaves with empty hands, which quietly completes the goal established before the gate opened. The receiving clerk's shelf turns the bundle from a carried responsibility into completed work, allowing the worker's return to remain simple. The sound that governed the night has settled into footsteps, a doorway, and a piece of work put where it belongs. At the clock station, the new shift continues without the episode following it. At the gate, the day crew manages ordinary passage. At the household, the worker closes no new mystery behind her. The timekeeping story is finished. What remains is the paper side of the night system, the permits and records that became harder to manage as officers multiplied their claims. In a later Joseon office, an adult clerk places several Muljimchup permits on a low desk. One uses an older form, another is newer. Two carry marks from different institutions. The old and new permit forms at the next desk echo the time system's changing instruments. Continuity will again depend on adults recognizing which authority is current, which is inherited, and which has become too uncertain for immediate use. The permit clerk's lamp falls across the differing forms, replacing the fading signal sound with another quiet problem of recognition. Dawnlight reaches the edge of the papers as he begins the quieter task of deciding what the next patrol should recognize. You remain near the later Joseon clerk as he lays the permits side by side. His ordinary goal is to leave the next watch a usable distinction between current authority, expired paper, and documents whose issuing offices have stretched the meaning of permission. The first Muljimchup uses an older form. The second is newer, but carries a blurred notation. The third comes from an office that has produced its own version. None of these details is invented as a single surviving packet. They stage the administrative conditions described in a peer-reviewed abstract. Later permits were overissued, old and new forms circulated together, and separate institutions made their own. The clerk begins with the issuing office, date, bearer, duty, route, and period of validity. A permit without a bounded task can easily become a private claim to the night. He places the oldest form beside the register rather than discarding it on appearance. Story 1 has already shown why. An old paper may still support current duty if the issuing authority confirms it. The clerk's task is not to make the night prohibition absolute. He places a blank comparison sheet beside the forms and copies only the fields a patrol can verify at night. Decorative language and broad claims of office favour are left out. What remains is the bearer, duty, route, issuer, and time. The practical facts that can survive lantern light and a disputed stop. The comparison sheet is copied for the patrol office before dusk. A second copy stays with the issuing clerk, allowing later questions to return to a named desk instead of circulating as rumour between watch posts. It is to keep exceptions legible enough that patrolmen can apply them without surrendering every decision to confidence and rank. He opens the register for authorised night business. Some names are entered for defined duties, others have been crossed out after completion or replacement. The paper record does not tell us every kind of emergency or necessary journey, so the narration does not invent a universal list of childbirth, illness, or private need. The strongest open scholarship supports the permit's administrative purpose, enabling necessary night work while creating opportunities for confusion and abuse. The clerk compares each bearer with the office roster. One old permit has a current name but an outdated route. He marks it for reissue. A newer form lacks the receiving office's acknowledgement. He sets it aside for confirmation. The office-made document may be valid within a narrow institutional duty, but it cannot become a general passport through every district merely because its seal looks important. The clerk writes a question to the issuing office. His actions are calm because the stakes are procedural, not theatrical. The current roster gives the clerk a second source beside the permit itself. When paper and register disagree, he does not choose the more impressive seal. He sends the inconsistency back to the office that created it, keeping the patrol from settling an internal administrative dispute in the street. When an office reply arrives, it must identify the duty rather than merely defend its servant. The clerk treats confirmation as useful only when it narrows the route and period the permit is meant to cover. Tomorrow's patrol should know which paper authorizes what movement, and which paper requires a stop at the watch post. A bundle of patrol complaints arrives. The reports describe encounters with attendants and lower functionaries attached to powerful offices. The scholarly abstracts say such people formed a large share of recorded violators and sometimes relied on institutional prestige to resist control. Patrol officials could be cursed, attacked, confined, or exposed to retaliation. The clerk does not read these harms as evidence that Joseon government was simply arbitrary. They reveal a conflict inside government. One office claims night work or privilege. Another office is responsible for enforcement. A patrolman stands where those claims meet, often with less rank than the person invoked by the traveller. The clerk groups the complaints by issuing institution and type of permit. Repeated problems from one office require more than punishing an individual bearer. They require limiting the office's ability to issue vague or reusable authority. He drafts a summary that asks for current forms, named routes, and return of obsolete permits. The complaint bundle includes reports from more than one district, which lets him see repetition rather than one personal quarrel. Similar claims of superior authority appear beside similar failures to show bounded duty. The pattern supports a correction aimed at issuing offices as well as individual bearers. He totals the repeated complaints by institution and adds the dates of earlier warnings. The pattern gives supervisors a basis for correcting issuance before another patrol encounter becomes personal retaliation. Existing rules will mean little if institutions can manufacture exceptions faster than patrols can check them. He reads older policy notes associated with reforms under King Sukjong and Youngjo. The accessible abstract does not provide every decree. so the narration keeps to its supported conclusion. Officials sought to make existing law workable, curb retaliation against patrolmen, reduce abuse of muljumchup, and check the overreach of powerful attendants. The clerk underlines the practical direction. The solution was not always a newly severe rule. It was the removal of obstacles that prevented the old rule from operating. That distinction fits the papers before him. A perfect prohibition written in large characters cannot guide a patrolman if 10 officers issue uncertain passes and punish anyone who questions them. A narrower, verifiable permission may improve both necessary work and public order. The clerk prepares a notice requiring the issuing office to replace the outdated route form. He attaches the patrol complaints, not to embarrass the bearers, but to show the consequence of administrative ambiguity. He copies the supported reform principle into the draft. Enforcement officers must be able to act without private retaliation, and night passes must not expand beyond their stated purpose. The language stays practical because the clerk wants the notice used at a watch post, not admired on a shelf. The revised sentence avoids promising that every official connection is false. It requires the connection to be attached to a defined task, preserving necessary government work while denying a vague claim of permanent privilege. The pile of uncertain documents becomes smaller by one. The next record concerns movement outside the wall. The clerk pauses because the capital system's geography is uneven. Research on 17th and 18th century Hunsong says enforcement concentrated inside the walled city. Outside, patrol was more discretionary, the territory broader, and agricultural movement harder to fit within strict prohibition. This does not mean there was no control beyond the gates. Other sources describe signaling and patrol in important regional cities and strategic places. It means the inner capital provided the strongest, most regular setting for the curfew mechanism described in the title. The clerk marks the outer road complaint for local review, rather than treating it as identical to a lane beside a palace office. Place changes what can be enforced and who has authority. A permit naming a gate crossing may matter differently from a permit naming an inner district. The wall is therefore not only a physical boundary, it divides administrative expectations. The outer road file names distances and local duties that the inner patrol record does not share. The clerk leaves room for the responsible local authority to explain those conditions. Uneven enforcement is not treated as absence of government, but as evidence that geography changes what regular control can achieve. The local review note asks who patrols the outer road, what movement the area's work requires, and which gate crossing is involved. Those questions make geographic variation visible without abandoning responsibility. He closes the outer road file and returns to the records that the Capital Patrol must use that night. A junior clerk enters with returned permits from completed duties. The senior man checks each against the register and marks it closed. Returned paper matters because a pass that remains in circulation can be reused after its task has ended. The open sources do not give a full return protocol for every office, so the scene stays within cautious administrative staging. Names, routes, dates, and completion marks are ordinary ways a record system can narrow authority. One permit bears a note from a patrol confirming escorted passage. Another has the receiving officer's acknowledgement. The senior clerk accepts them. A third has no completion mark and must be checked before reissue. He does not accuse the bearer. He leaves the document inactive until the office answers. The goal is a usable night file, not an impressive pile of confiscated paper. The returned documents are tied separately from active ones. A patrol clerk receiving the new list will not need to search through completed duties to find current permission. Order on the desk becomes less uncertainty at the next stop, which is the modest scale on which the system improves. Completed passes are stored with their matching entries rather than mixed into the active bundle. The arrangement lets a later reviewer see why authority ended and whether the bearer returned through the expected route. By the end of the review, the clerk can tell the patrol office which permits are current, which require verification, and which should no longer be honoured. He prepares the notice for patrol posts. The language is plain. Recognize the listed current forms for the named duties. Refer uncertain old forms to the issuing office or watch post. Record the bearer, route, time, and office. Do not treat institutional connection alone as unrestricted permission. The notice does not promise equal enforcement by itself. Rank, place, resistance, and relationships continue to shape practice. It gives patrolmen a clearer basis for a defensible decision. The clerk adds a line that complaints against patrol officials must be investigated rather than ignored because of the offender's employer. This follows the reform direction described in the late Joseon scholarship. He sends copies through the appropriate administrative channels. The papers leave his desk and enter the same human system as the time signal. One office writes, another receives, a patrolman reads, and a traveller encounters the result in lantern light. He asks a junior clerk to read the patrol notice back to him. The younger man pauses at the phrase about office connection, then repeats it clearly. The senior clerk revises one sentence, so that an authorized duty remains recognizable without granting every attached servant general freedom of movement. The junior clerk carries the final notice to the copying desk and returns with the first clean version. The senior clerk compares it line by line, keeping an accidental omission from becoming a new source of confusion. Administration becomes real only when the next adult can act on it. Years of records accumulate around the clerk's work. The narration does not ask one man to live through all 5 centuries. It follows a later official near the end of the old system, reading files that preserve earlier conflicts and current forms that show continuing adjustment. Hanyang has also been called Hansung in administrative contexts, while modern Seoul overlaps the site without making every name interchangeable. He writes Hansungbu when the office record requires it, and thinks of the walled capital whose gates still answer the nightly signals. The names shift with chronology and institution, just as bells, towers, patrol assignments, and instruments shifted. Continuity lies in the governing function, not in frozen vocabulary. The clerk receives a new directive concerning the future of the old time signals. The directive's vocabulary belongs to a changing state, while the older register preserves terms from the system it replaces. The clerk keeps both intact. He does not modernize the old entries, or make Hanyang, Hansong, and Seoul interchangeable across their contexts. The office book records the capital name used by the directive, and preserves older names inside quoted titles and registers. Chronology remains a practical discipline on the page, not an ornamental correction for the listener. He sets aside the permit register and reads it twice before entering the order in the office book. The directive belongs to the reforms of 1895. Institutional sources agree that the Joseon-era Ingyung and Paru curfew system ended that year, though one reference gives a September promulgation and another describes the signals stopping in late October. The narration does not force those dates into a false single day. The clerk records the supported point. The old nightly prohibition and its defining signals are being abolished as part of a changed administrative order. This does not erase every practice at once from every street. Orders travel through offices and people adapt at different speeds. It does end the legal framework that made the evening and dawn signals the routine boundary of curfew. The clerk copies the directive for patrol offices and gate authorities. He places the old permit forms beside it. He notes the different dates in the institutional references only in the research record, not in a false spoken certainty. For the office action, the operative order and designated transition are enough. The historical fact carried into narration remains the shared one. Abolition occurred in 1895. He notes which posts must receive the abolition order first, so that an old permit is not honoured in one district after being cancelled in another. Administrative endings need coordinated receipt as much as beginnings do. Documents created to authorise exceptions are losing their purpose because the general prohibition they accepted is being removed. He begins closing the permit register. Current night passes are listed so the issuing officers can cancel or archive them under the new order. Patrol posts receive instructions that the old curfew authority will no longer operate after the designated change. Gate management continues for security and traffic, but it is no longer identical to the old nightly prohibition on movement within the walls. This distinction matters. Ending curfew does not make keys, guards, walls, or opening schedules meaningless in a single breath. It changes the legal condition attached to the night signal. The clerk writes separate notices for gate authorities and patrol officers because closing a city gate and restricting every street traveller were connected systems, not one physical action. The papers that once linked them are now being separated. Separate notices prevent one administrative ending from being misunderstood as the disappearance of every gate duty. Guards will still manage thresholds under new rules. Patrol organizations will still have public order work. What ends is the old routine curfew authority tied to Ingyong and Paru. Gate officers acknowledge that their keys and watches continue under separate instructions. Patrol officers acknowledge the changed basis for stopping travelers. The clerk files both replies beside the order that divided the functions. He ties the completed notices and sends them outward. One of the last nights under the old arrangement arrives without a public speech in the clerk's room. He remains at his desk as the evening signal sounds. 28 strokes still carry the familiar instruction. Patrolmen take their routes. Gate guards secure the main passages. Householders close their doors. The clerk looks at the cancelled permits beside the new directive. The same sound now belongs to a system with a known administrative end. He does not turn the moment into a modern moral. The people carrying out the night's work are still completing ordinary duties. A patrol post receives the list of valid documents for this final interval. A guard checks a key. A household sets down its bar. The clerk hears the old evening count without adding symbolism already explained. His hand rests on the cancelled forms while the sound passes. The papers and the bell belong to the same closing system for one more interval. Then their connection will become an archival fact. The final valid permit list is intentionally short. Each remaining bearer has a named duty and endpoint for the last interval, allowing patrols to close the old system without inventing broad exceptions at its edge. The clerk closes the old register after the last entry and places the cancellation order on top. The hours pass. No new permit dispute is introduced. The clerk reviews the notices once more and prepares the morning handover. At Paru, the dawn release sounds according to the old rhythm. 33 strokes move across the capital. Gate crews begin opening. Patrols return. Household doorways admit the morning. For the clerk, the sound closes more than one watch. It closes the record system he has spent the night sorting. He marks the final page and leaves the next book ready for administration without the old curfew permits. The historical transition is not imagined as every resident understanding reform at once. He checks that every cancelled form is either returned, marked, or listed for follow-up. The task is quiet, because abolition also requires administration. A rule can end in law, while stray documents continue to claim authority, unless someone closes their path back into use. At morning handover, the incoming clerk reads the cancellation marks and confirms that no blank permits remain on the active desk. The old forms move together into storage rather than lingering as usable authority. It is shown where the evidence is strongest. An official system ends, its signals cease as curfew commands, and the paperwork built around exceptions is withdrawn. The clerk carries the closed register to its shelf. He places the new directive in the active file and returns the unused permit forms to their issuing office. His ordinary goal is complete. He has sorted valid from irregular authority, translated complaints into clearer instruction, marked the difference between inner and outer enforcement, and closed the system when the reform order ended it. The curfew's long history now appears as neither a perfect wall nor a meaningless rule. It was an adaptable instrument of order whose operation depended on signals, gates, patrols, documents, offices, status, geography, and human judgement. Those same dependencies produced loopholes and conflict. In 1895, the old structure was formally removed. The empty permit space in the new book is not presented as freedom in the abstract. It is simply a changed office routine. The clerk's next entries will concern different duties, while the old night passes remain together as records of a system no longer operating. The closed register receives a date, office name, and final notation. The clerk does not decorate the ending. He leaves enough information for a future reader to know why the series stops where it does. The clerk extinguishes the desk lamp because dawn has entered the room. Outside, an opened gate receives people from both directions. A porter adjusts a load. A worker steps through a household doorway. A former night patrolman walks toward his lodging with the clapper at his side. The clerk joins the morning street carrying no new question. The wall remains. The lanterns grow less necessary. A folded permit rests in an archive rather than in a traveller's hand. Footsteps spread along the road without an announcement of what the future must mean. The episode's 4 stories have reached their payoffs. His footsteps join the porter and worker without becoming a symbol they must understand. The open gate, pale lantern, resting clapper, folded permit, and familiar wall are enough. The coder can now remain with those established objects and remove the last remaining complexity. The porter and worker move at different paces, and the former patrolman keeps to the side of the road. Their ordinary spacing lets the episode descend through action rather than through a declared lesson. What remains is only the familiar bell, gate, lantern, clapper, wall, permit, doorway, and dawn. Held without adding another fact, the last bell sound rests beyond the wall. The gate stands open in the dawn, its heavy wood no longer moving. A lantern remains beside the doorway, pale now in the growing light. The clapper is still. A folded permit lies flat, its creases familiar and quiet. Footsteps pass the threshold at an easy distance from one another. Nothing asks to be decided. The wall keeps its long line, the doorway keeps its simple frame, and the morning gathers around them. Along the wall, the lantern light fades while dawn becomes clearer. The gate, the doorway, and the folded permit remain where the stories left them. A wooden clapper rests beside a quiet hand. The bell no longer needs to carry another signal. Footsteps continue through the opening, soft and ordinary. The gate timbers are steady. The paper does not move. The wall receives the morning light, and the familiar road beyond it stays open. The doorway is open. The lantern is set back from the threshold. Beyond it, the wall and gate keep their familiar shapes. A permit remains folded, no longer lifted toward the light. The clapper gives no call. Dawn rests on the road where footsteps have already passed. The bell is only a remembered distance now, and the heavy wood is still. The lantern remains near the doorway, and the open gate keeps the same quiet space around the road. The scene holds without another task. Gate, wall, lantern, and doorway remain together in the pale morning. The folded permit lies quiet. The wooden clapper rests. Footsteps have thinned, leaving the open passage clear. No bell stroke follows. The timbers do not shift. Dawn touches the road and the lower edge of the wall. The permit, lantern, and clapper stay beside the doorway while the wall holds its familiar line. The familiar objects stay in their places, with nothing more required from them. The open gate holds the last image. The wall continues beside it. A lantern, a clapper, a folded permit, and a quiet doorway remain in the dawn. The bell has faded. Footsteps have moved on. The wood is still, the paper is still, and the road is clear. The lantern rests near the doorway, and dawn remains along the wall and open road. The morning rests over the familiar threshold.